To start us off, we'd like to talk a little bit about, sort of the identity of the entire RiverLine project, right? And we have three kind of very distinct identity approaches to review with you all today. Um, and as we kind of go through and get a sense of the look and feel and how these approaches might play out, we will ask you to kind of think about the options that jump out at you, certain kind of features or aspects. Ultimately, we won't necessarily pick just one of these identities, but will probably be sort of a hybrid. But the three identities are kind of pulling some inspiration from different themes. So the first one is pulling inspiration from the river itself. And this identity is really centered on pulling through that kind of cohesive, consistent riverline identity to all of the sites and projects along the river, right? So this one's really consistent, really leaning into the kind of riverline identity, the riverline colors, and really kind of pulls this connective river-based thread throughout the region. The second identity is pulling inspiration from the landscape. And so this one really kind of leans into the specific kind of local context of each of the river line sites. So this one really kind of focuses on kind of the natural materials that have to do with each of these local landscapes, right? So while there would be consistent themes and threads pulled throughout, there would also be some variation as these sites kind of responded to specific contexts. And then the last identity pulls inspiration from the stories of the region. So this one really leans into a kind of vibrant, playful palette that really emphasizes kind of interpretive storytelling of the region and really sort of connects these threads that you can kind of follow to learn about some of the stories in the region throughout. So we'll get into kind of some preliminary look and feel of how each of these identities, you know, might play out, and then we'll kind of talk about them all together. So to start from the river, for each we kind of have a spread of some regional inspiration that's kind of driving this palette, right? And so this one's really leaning into, of course, the river itself, really kind of pulling those sort of silvery blue tones, a little bit more of a muted palette that can really kind of allow the landscape to shine and really kind of celebrate those natural sort of wilderness moments along the river. And so the material palette for that, how that kind of might, translate to the actual sort of materials and finishes, again, really leans into these sort of cool blues, kind of more silvery tones, really leaning into kind of some stone, kind of refined aggregate paving, some river rock, soft textural stone materials, weaving in some kind of light natural wood to kind of create this kind of sort of comforting, welcoming, soft kind of textures. And then this one here, we have the Riverline sort of identity colors. So this one would have these sort of pops of the Riverline blue, kind of carrying you throughout and linking together all of these sites along the river, right? So soft, muted palette with pops of color that kind of pull your eye throughout. And the next, look at an inspiration or an identity that's pulling inspiration from the landscape. So this one's really kind of leaning into the more brown rust colors, these sort of like rich textures coming from the landscape of the region. So looking at a lot of natural stone, these kind of mussel shoals and weathered metals that we see around the region, really leading into these kind of reddish brown and tans. And that translates into a palette that feels sort of very rich and textural, really leaning into weathered, reclaimed natural materials that could be found in the landscape or in kind of the immediate local context, right? So this one's really kind of playing up those craggy textures, lots of stone and wood, maybe some things like reclaimed brick or shell that's kind of incorporated into some paving materials, walls, aggregates, looking for ways to kind of play up sort of what's immediately found in the region, right? So this would vary a little bit site to site within this palette of natural materials. And then the last palette is pulling inspiration from the stories of the region, right? So this one's really leaning into sort of contemporary and historic storytelling around people, ecology, industry, geology, looking at some stories and narratives that maybe want might be played up and may kind of tell this sort of vibrant, kind of playful story of the region. So for this one, the palette is a little bit different. Rather than being kind of one consistent palette, it's really sort of this spread of options of maybe different storytelling themes that might be emphasized. So here we're kind of using color to differentiate between four sort of preliminary themes of stories that may kind of emerge. So we've kind of framed it as contemporary storytelling of today, um, sort of the geologic and pre-colonial history, history of TVA and industry in the region, and then ecology in the blue. And so the idea is that different communities or different places could really kind of choose to play up and emphasize and celebrate different stories based on local context and based on interest. And this palette would really lean into these kind of playful, interpretive storytelling elements, right? So furnishing, wayfinding, signage would all kind of feel playful and engaging and really cue you in and tell these stories through signage, through sculptural elements, and through a variety of ways to kind of engage with these stories.